The aroma of freshly brewed coffee usually filled our kitchen on Saturday mornings, a comforting ritual before the day unfolded. Today, the scent felt different, tainted somehow. Sarah was already up, humming softly as she moved around the kitchen island, preparing her usual elaborate breakfast. She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed with a rosy hue, and her eyes sparkled with an unusual brightness. I tried to shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 7. We had a beautiful home, 2 well-behaved dogs, and what I thought was a solid, loving relationship. Lately, though, something felt off. A subtle shift in the atmosphere between us, a distance that hadn't been there before. Sarah seemed preoccupied, her attention often drifting away mid-conversation. She'd become incredibly protective of her phone, clutching it like a precious jewel, and her late nights working extra shifts at the hospital had become increasingly frequent. I tried to dismiss my worries as simple stress, the pressures of her demanding job as a surgeon. But the nagging feeling persisted, a disquieting whisper in the back of my mind. This morning, watching her as she carefully arranged slices of avocado on her toast, the whisper grew louder, more insistent. I tried to smile, to engage her in our usual Saturday morning banter, but the smile felt forced, and the words caught in my throat. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. Later that day, Sarah mentioned she was going to a conference out of town for a few days. It wasn't unusual. Her work often required her to attend these events. But this time, a flicker of unease sparked within me. It was a midweek conference, and she seemed unusually enthusiastic about it, almost relieved. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. After she left, the house felt strangely empty, the silence amplifying the nagging feeling in my gut. I decided to do some work in the study, a task I'd been putting off. As I was organizing some files, I stumbled upon Sarah's laptop. It wasn't password protected, which was odd. She was usually so careful about her privacy. A strange curiosity compelled me to open it. I knew I shouldn't, that I was violating her trust, but the feeling that something was amiss was overwhelming. I told myself I was just checking for any important work emails she might have forgotten to mention. But deep down, I knew I was looking for something else, something I couldn't quite name. I clicked through a few files, finding nothing out of the ordinary. Then, I saw a folder labeled Personal. My heart pounded in my chest. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the mouse. The voice of reason whispered in my ear, telling me to stop, to respect her privacy. But the insistent whisper, the one that had been haunting me for weeks, was louder now, demanding to be heard. I clicked the folder. The contents of the folder hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't what I expected. Not a simple email or a hidden message. It was far more disturbing. It was a collection of chat logs, images, and videos. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. Then, as I scrolled through the files, the pieces began to fit together, forming a picture that shattered my perception of Sarah, of our life together. She was engaging in elaborate online role-playing scenarios with strangers. Not just casual chatting, but deeply immersive experiences, where she assumed different personas and explored a world of fantasy and intimacy. The messages were explicit, detailing desires and encounters that I couldn't reconcile with the woman I thought I knew. The images and videos were even more shocking, depicting her engaging in acts that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the physical aspect. It was the emotional investment, the vulnerability she displayed with these anonymous strangers. It felt like a betrayal, a profound violation of our marriage. I felt a wave of nausea, not just from the content I was seeing, but from the realization that the woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, was a stranger to me. Tears welled up in my eyes, a mixture of hurt, anger, and disbelief. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. I felt like my world had just been turned upside down. The comfortable, familiar life I thought we had was an illusion, a carefully constructed facade. I sat there in the study, the silence of the house pressing in on me, the weight of the discovery crushing me. I didn't know what to do, how to process what I had just seen. The only thing I knew for sure was that everything had changed. The initial shock gave way to a burning rage. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly lost. The images from Sarah's laptop seared themselves into my mind, replaying on an endless loop. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her voice, but it wasn't the Sarah I knew. It was a stranger, a woman who had been living a secret life, indulging in desires and fantasies that I had no part in. The pain was unbearable. I wanted to confront her, to scream and shout, to demand answers. But a cold, calculating part of me took hold. A part of me that wanted to inflict the same pain, the same sense of betrayal that she had inflicted on me. Revenge. The word echoed in my mind, a dark and dangerous whisper. I knew it wasn't the answer, that it wouldn't bring me peace or heal the wounds she had inflicted. But the desire for retribution was overwhelming. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of my life, but my mind was consumed with thoughts of Sarah, of her betrayal, of my revenge. I started researching online role-playing communities, trying to understand the world she had immersed herself in. I learned about the different platforms, the various genres, the intricate rules and etiquette. And then, an idea began to form, a plan that was as cruel as it was calculated. I would infiltrate her online world, become a part of her secret life, and expose her deceit. I would make her pay for what she had done, not with physical violence or angry words, but with something far more devastating. The destruction of her reputation, the shattering of her carefully constructed facade. Creating a fake profile was surprisingly easy. I chose a generic username, John Smith 123, and used a stock photo of a nondescript man. I spent hours crafting a backstory, a persona that would blend seamlessly into Sarah's online world. I studied the language, the jargon, the subtle nuances of the community. I wanted to be believable, someone she would trust, someone she would open up to. Then I began the search. I knew her online alias, Crimson Rose, a name that now held a bitter irony. I found her profile on one of the platforms she frequented, a site dedicated to fantasy role-playing. Her profile picture was a stylized image of a woman with long, flowing red hair and piercing green eyes. It was a far cry from the Sarah I knew, the practical, no-nonsense surgeon with her blonde bob and sensible glasses. I read through her posts, her comments, her interactions with others. It was like peering into a parallel universe, a world where she was uninhibited, where she explored desires and fantasies that I never knew existed. I felt a strange mix of fascination and revulsion. This was my wife, yet she was a complete stranger. I sent her a friend request, my heart pounding in my chest. It was the first step in my plan, the beginning of my revenge. The wait for her response was agonizing. Every notification, every email, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Then finally it came. A simple message, "Thanks for the friend request. Looking forward to role-playing with you." I felt a surge of triumph, mixed with a sickening sense of guilt. I was about to deceive the woman I loved, to manipulate her, to use her own secrets against her. But the anger, the hurt, the desire for revenge outweighed any reservations. I was committed to my plan, no matter the cost. Our initial interactions were cautious, tentative. I played the role of a newcomer, eager to learn the ropes of the online world. Sarah, or rather Crimson Rose, was surprisingly patient, guiding me through the intricacies of the platform, explaining the different genres and scenarios. As we interacted, I began to see a different side of her. She was witty, imaginative, and surprisingly vulnerable. She shared her thoughts and feelings with a freedom that she never displayed in our real life. I learned about her childhood dreams, her hidden desires, her frustrations with her demanding job. It was a strange and unsettling experience, getting to know my wife through the eyes of a stranger. I found myself drawn to her online persona, even as I despised the deception that lay beneath it. I played along with her fantasies, participating in elaborate role-playing scenarios, exploring worlds of magic, adventure, and romance. I learned to speak her language, to anticipate her desires, to fulfill her fantasies in ways that I never could in our real life. It was a twisted game, a dangerous dance on the edge of betrayal, but I was determined to see it through, to gain her trust, to gather the evidence I needed to expose her. As the days turned into weeks, our online interactions became more frequent, more intimate. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, to the escape they provided from the pain and anger of my real life. I was playing with fire, I knew that, but the flames were strangely alluring, offering a warmth that I had been missing for so long. The deeper I ventured into Sarah's online world, the more complex my feelings became. It wasn't just about the intimate role-playing anymore. I was getting glimpses of a woman I barely recognized, a woman who was yearning for something more than her everyday life could offer. She confided in me, or rather in John Smith 123, about her frustrations with her demanding career, the pressure to be perfect, the loneliness she felt despite being surrounded by people. She spoke of a longing for adventure, for passion, for a connection that she felt was missing in our marriage. It was a painful realization, a bitter pill to swallow. I had been so focused on my own hurt, my own betrayal, that I had failed to see her pain, her own unmet needs. It didn't excuse her actions, but it added a layer of complexity to the situation, a nuance that I hadn't considered before. I started to question my own role in our failing marriage. Had I been too distant, too focused on my own work, too oblivious to her needs? Had I inadvertently pushed her into the arms of strangers, even if those arms were only virtual? The guilt gnawed at me, adding to the already heavy burden of anger and hurt. I was still determined to carry out my plan, but the motivation had shifted. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about understanding, about confronting the truth, about exposing the cracks in our relationship that had allowed this to happen. It was about finding a way to move forward, even if it meant tearing down everything we had built together. The plan, once crystal clear in its cruelty, now felt murky, tainted by this newfound understanding. But the wheels were already in motion. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, meticulously documenting Sarah's online activities. Screenshots of conversations, images, even recordings of video chats where her face, flushed with excitement, was clearly visible. I had created a separate email account, anonymous and untraceable, and compiled a dossier that would shatter her carefully curated image. My initial intention was to send it to everyone she knew, her colleagues at the hospital, her friends, even her family. I wanted to expose her hypocrisy, the stark contrast between her public persona and her private life. I wanted her to feel the shame, the humiliation, the isolation that I had been enduring. But now, the thought of inflicting that kind of pain on her, even after everything, felt wrong. It wouldn't bring me any satisfaction, wouldn't mend the broken pieces of our marriage. It would only create more pain, more damage, more scars. Yet, I couldn't simply let it go. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. I needed some form of closure, some way to confront the truth, to force a reckoning. So I revised my plan. I would still expose her, but the audience would be limited. Just her closest friends, the ones she confided in, the ones who held her in high esteem. I wanted them to see the real Sarah, the woman behind the mask, the woman who was capable of such deception. It was a compromise, a less destructive path, but one that still held the power to shatter her world. The weight of the evidence I had compiled was heavy, both physically and metaphorically. The folder on my computer, filled with screenshots, chat logs, and video clips, felt like a lead weight in my stomach. Each file was a testament to Sarah's betrayal, a reminder of the double life she had been leading. I spent hours going through the material, reliving each conversation, each intimate encounter. It was a torturous process, a constant reopening of the wound. But I forced myself to do it, to confront the reality of the situation, to prepare myself for the confrontation to come. I organized the evidence meticulously, creating a timeline of Sarah's online activities, highlighting the most incriminating details. I wanted to leave no room for doubt, no possibility of denial. I wanted her to see the extent of her deception, the depth of her betrayal. It was a strange feeling, this meticulous preparation for the destruction of my own wife's reputation. It felt cold, calculated, almost clinical. But beneath the surface, the anger still burned, a fiery core that fueled my actions. I was no longer the man I had been before the discovery. The betrayal had changed me, hardened me, turned me into someone capable of inflicting pain on the woman I once loved. It was a realization that both terrified and empowered me. I was in control now, the master of my own destiny, the architect of my own revenge. And I was ready to unleash it. The day of reckoning arrived with a chilling finality. It was a Wednesday, a typical workday for Sarah. I imagined her in her crisp white coat, moving with practiced efficiency through the corridors of the hospital, her colleagues oblivious to the secret life she led. The thought brought a bitter satisfaction. I sat at my computer, the anonymous email account open, the cursor blinking in the recipient field. I had carefully selected the recipients, her two closest friends from medical school, the ones she had known the longest, the ones she trusted implicitly. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a tremor of doubt running through me. Was I doing the right thing? Would this bring me the closure I craved? Or would it simply create more pain, more destruction? The questions swirled in my mind, but the momentum was too strong now. I had come too far to turn back. With a deep breath, I typed in the subject line, "The Real Crimson Rose." I attached the dossier, the meticulously compiled evidence of Sarah's online activities. Then, with a final click, I sent the email. The moment the message left my outbox, a wave of relief washed over me. It was done. The truth was out there. Sarah's carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes, a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration coursing through me. I had no idea what the consequences would be, how Sarah would react, how her friends would respond. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within hours, my phone began to buzz with messages and missed calls. Sarah's friends, shocked and bewildered, reached out to me, seeking confirmation, demanding explanations. I responded with a curt message, confirming the authenticity of the email, offering no further comment. Then the silence, a deafening silence that spoke volumes. I imagined Sarah, confronted by her friends, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The shame, the humiliation, the betrayal, it was all mirrored back at her, amplified by the shock and disappointment in the eyes of those she trusted most. I didn't need to witness it to know the devastation it wrought. Her absence from work the next day was a silent confirmation. Whispers and rumors filled the hospital corridors, her reputation tarnished, her career hanging in the balance. The consequences extended beyond her professional life. Her social circle, once vibrant and supportive, began to shrink. Friends distanced themselves, invitations dried up. The once warm embrace of her community turned cold and unforgiving. The isolation was palpable, a suffocating blanket of shame and judgment. I watched from a distance, a silent observer of the wreckage I had created. There was no satisfaction, no sense of triumph. Only a hollow ache in my chest, a reflection of the emptiness that now consumed Sarah's life. Days turned into weeks, the silence between Sarah and me stretching into an unbridgeable chasm. The house, once filled with laughter and the comforting rhythm of our shared life, now echoed with emptiness. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, haunted by the memories of what we had lost. The initial anger, the burning desire for revenge, had subsided, leaving behind a profound sadness. I had destroyed Sarah's world, but in doing so, I had also destroyed my own. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. There was no winner in this game of betrayal and revenge. We were both casualties, wounded and scarred, the remnants of a love that had been poisoned by deceit and mistrust. I tried to reach out to Sarah, to offer an explanation, an apology, but my words felt hollow, inadequate in the face of the pain I had inflicted. She responded with silence, a silence that spoke volumes. It was a rejection, a condemnation, a final severing of the ties that had bound us together. I was left to grapple with the consequences of my actions, the weight of my own guilt and regret. The revenge I had sought had brought no solace, no closure. It had only amplified the pain, deepened the wounds, and left me with a profound sense of emptiness. The silence finally broke one evening, shattering the fragile peace I had settled into. The doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound that echoed through the empty house. I knew instinctively who it was. Sarah stood on the doorstep, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I stepped aside, my heart pounding in my chest. We sat in the living room, the familiar surroundings now charged with an unbearable tension. The words tumbled out of her, a torrent of accusations, of hurt, of disbelief. "How could you?" she cried, her voice breaking. "How could you do this to me? To us?" I listened, offering no excuses, no justifications. I had betrayed her trust, violated our marriage, and inflicted pain that would likely never heal. "I saw the emails," she continued, her voice trembling. "I saw everything. The conversations, the pictures, the videos." She trailed off, unable to continue. I looked at her, my heart aching. The woman I loved, the woman I had vowed to protect, was now a stranger. Her eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why? Why did you do this?" I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. "Because I was hurt," I finally managed to say. "Because I felt betrayed. Because I wanted you to feel the same pain that I felt." The words hung in the air, heavy with regret and remorse. They were the truth, but they were also an inadequate explanation for the cruelty I had inflicted. The conversation that followed was raw, painful, and ultimately futile. We dissected our marriage, exposing the cracks that had been hidden beneath the surface. We spoke of unmet needs, of unspoken desires, of the gradual erosion of intimacy that had led us to this point. There were tears, accusations, and moments of raw honesty that cut like a knife. But there was also a sense of finality, an acknowledgement that the damage was irreparable. We had reached a point of no return, a place where forgiveness seemed impossible. In the end, the decision was mutual, though unspoken. We couldn't stay together, couldn't pretend that the past could be erased. The trust was broken, the foundation of our relationship shattered beyond repair. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable, a testament to the exhaustion and resignation that had settled over us. We divided our assets, signed the papers, and went our separate ways. Sarah moved out, taking with her a few belongings and a lifetime of memories. I watched her go, a part of me wanting to reach out, to stop her, to beg for another chance. But the words wouldn't come. I knew, deep down, that it was over. We had both made mistakes, both inflicted pain, both crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. The house felt unbearably empty without her, a constant reminder of what I had lost. But there was also a sense of liberation, a freedom from the weight of deceit and betrayal. I was alone now, but I was also free to rebuild my life, to learn from the mistakes of the past, to find a way to heal. Life after Sarah was a slow, arduous process of rebuilding. The initial shock and grief gradually gave way to a quiet acceptance. I focused on my work, reconnected with old friends, and slowly began to forge a new life for myself. The memories of Sarah, of our life together, remained, but the sharp edges of pain had softened with time. I learned to forgive not just Sarah but myself. I had made mistakes, acted out of anger and hurt, but I had also learned valuable lessons about trust, communication, and the destructive nature of revenge. The experience had changed me, stripped away the naive illusions of a perfect marriage, and forced me to confront the complexities of human relationships. I was no longer the man I had been before the discovery of Sarah's online life. I was older, wiser, and perhaps a little more cynical. But I was also more resilient, more self-aware, and more determined to build a future based on honesty and authenticity. The scars remained, a permanent reminder of the pain and betrayal I had endured, but they were also a testament to my capacity for healing, for growth, for finding a way to move forward. In the end, the story of Sarah and me was not just a tale of betrayal and revenge. It was a story of love, loss, and the enduring power of the human spirit to find a way to heal, even in the face of unimaginable pain.